The most dangerous thing in your life is not what people did to you, not the economy, not your failures, not your past. It is the moment you let your inner storm run your decisions. An untrained emotion can destroy what a decade of discipline built. But the moment you learn to take authority over the impulses that try to hijack your mind, you flip the power back in your hands. Those who lead their emotions lead their life. Those who are led by their emotions lose it. Feelings happen to you without asking your permission. They rise the same way a knee jerks when struck, or how your pupils shrink when exposed to light. They are immediate biological and psychological signals. What they are not is law, mandate, or destiny. The moment you treat a feeling like an instruction, you hand over authorship of your life to an impulse that didn't think, it just appeared. This is where most people lose battles not to circumstances, but to their own internal weather. They confuse internal alerts with external commands. They let a spike of anger fire off a text that burns a bridge. They let a wave of fear stop them from entering rooms they belonged in. They let a moment of insecurity make them shrink in front of opportunities that never returned. The tragedy is not that they felt something, it's that they obeyed it. A feeling is a statement that something in your inner or outer world has been noticed. It is a data point. It is not a verdict. If someone disrespects you, anger is a reaction, your system registering a violation, but the instruction is not destroy them, scream, or withdraw forever. The instruction comes later, after thinking. If you are afraid before taking a risk, fear is a reaction, your body marking uncertainty, but the instruction is not retreat. The instruction might be prepare more, or calculate better, or proceed with awareness. The gap between reaction and instruction is precisely where maturity separates itself from impulse. The reason young versions of us made such destructive decisions is because we had no filter. We believed every story our emotions told. If we felt unwanted, we assumed we were unworthy. If we felt afraid, we assumed danger was real. If we felt angry, we assumed retaliation was justified. The mind of an untrained person merges emotion with truth. The mind of a disciplined person extracts emotion as a signal, but keeps truth in the hands of reason. Mastery begins when you introduce delay, not days, not months, moments. A 2-second pause can rewrite futures. You feel jealousy, pause before interpreting it. You feel rage, pause before speaking. You feel shame, pause before surrendering. That pause is the difference between a life built on evidence and a life built on reflex. Reflex produces apology, reflection produces accuracy. People often say, I can't help what I feel. They are correct. But what they mean without realizing is, I use that fact as an excuse to not control what I do next. The inability to control first impulses does not absolve you from controlling the next choice. You are not responsible for the first wave, but you are absolutely responsible for whether you surf it or drown under it. Emotional maturity is not emotional anesthesia, it is emotional governance. The danger of obeying feelings is that feelings are temporary while consequences are durable. You may feel betrayed for a day and permanently destroy a relationship because you obeyed an urge you later outgrew. You may feel intimidated for 30 minutes and lose a career opportunity that would have changed a lifetime. You may feel discouraged for a week and abandon a discipline that would have built a future self you would have admired. Feelings evaporate, reactions calcify. One of the strongest advantages of understanding that feelings are signals is that you can interrogate them instead of kneeling to them. When a feeling arrives, the right question is never, what should I do because of this? But rather, what is this feeling trying to tell me? A feeling of envy might mean you secretly desire that level of discipline or achievement, not that you need to sabotage or diminish the person who triggered it. Shravet. A feeling of loneliness might mean you crave deeper alignment, not that you must run to anyone available. A feeling of fear might mean that something matters deeply, not that you are unfit to pursue it. To treat feelings as instructions is to live as a puppet whose strings are pulled by the last emotion that visited. To treat feelings as information is to live as an architect who reads the data of the site before designing the structure. You are not meant to suffocate feelings nor worship them. You are meant to govern them. They are employees, not kings. The greatest losses in human life come not from the existence of emotions, but from the supremacy we give them. The day you stop treating your emotions like commanders and start treating them like advisors, you stop living as a hostage to impulses you never chose. Feel deeply, but decide rationally. The signal is allowed to speak, but instruction belongs to the one who thinks, not the one who reacts. This is not coldness, this is sovereignty. People imagine that some people are born calm, composed, unshakable, as if emotional discipline is a genetic blessing reserved for a small percentage of lucky humans. That myth is comforting because it excuses the rest from doing the actual work. If regulation were inborn, then your outbursts, collapses, and reactions would be nature's fault, not your responsibility. But emotional discipline is not temperament, it is training. It is not who you are, it is what you practice. The proof is everywhere. People who once reacted violently now speak with surgical restraint. People who once cried at every resistance now negotiate pressure like athletes. People who once ran from conflict now breathe through it with precision. They did not become a different species, they built a different skill. A skill, by definition, is something that improves with repetition, correction, and consistency. Emotional discipline grows the same way muscle grows, through deliberate resistance. Every time you are triggered and choose not to explode, you add a fiber. Every time you are tempted to spiral and choose to breathe, you add another. Every time you are disrespected and choose to respond with strategy instead of fury, the architecture of your inner authority rearranges itself. Change here does not happen in applause filled moments of inspiration. It happens in thousands of quiet micro choices where old patterns demand obedience and you decline. Because it is a skill, emotional discipline depends on exposure, not avoidance. You cannot develop composure by living a life that never provokes you. You build emotional muscles the same way soldiers build battlefield readiness inside real conditions. People think their lack of emotional control is proof that they are just like that. No, it is proof that they have not trained yet. If you never lift weights, of course your arms feel weak. If you never train responses, of course your reactions run you. Weakness is not identity, it is a measurement of untrained capacity. There is a brutal but liberating truth embedded in this: improvement is predictable. If it were personality, you could do nothing. If it is skill, then your future emotional strength is proportional to your practice. The question is not, who am I emotionally, but how often do I actually train my responses? Training can look like creating distance before reacting, journaling instead of venting, rehearsing better responses, exposing yourself to difficult conversations slowly, or conditioning your nervous system through breath and stillness. There is nothing mystical about this. It is mechanical. People expect emotional discipline to appear in the moment of crisis without rehearsing it when stakes are low. That is like expecting to perform surgery without ever practicing in a lab. When you choose silence over impulsive texting, when you decide to speak tomorrow instead of in anger tonight, when you sit with discomfort instead of rushing to numb it, these are rehearsals. So when life hits you with a real test, you are not improvising, you are executing a trained behavior. The reason so many struggle is because they treat emotional responses as sacred self expression. They think, if I feel it, I must show it or I am being fake. No, impulse is not identity. You can feel rage and still speak with accuracy. You can feel fear and still move rationally. Emotional discipline does not silence emotion, it escorts it through logic before turning it into action. A soldier does not deny adrenaline, he functions through it. A surgeon does not deny stress, she operates under it. Control is not the absence of intensity, it is the mastery of translation. One of the greatest advantages of treating discipline as a skill is that failure becomes feedback, not fate. When you slip, when you snap, when you panic, when you shut down, that is not proof that you are incapable. It is proof that you are in training. You gather data. What triggered you? Where did the gap collapse? What will you do next time in the first 30 seconds instead of the last 30 minutes? This converts shame into calibration. You stop judging yourself for not being naturally calm and start engineering systems that make calm reproducible. Another consequence of reframing emotional discipline as a skill is that you stop waiting for ideal circumstances to feel regulated. People say, I will be emotionally in control when life settles. But life never settles. The world does not stop to allow you to develop, you develop in motion. Regulation is not a response to peace. It is a structure built in turbulence. When you finally internalize that emotional discipline is trained, not inherited, the narrative of your life shifts from victimhood to authorship. You stop saying, this is just me, and start saying, this is how I currently perform. Current performance is modifiable. You are not condemned to the first draft of your nervous system. You can rewrite the way you react, not by praying for a new personality, but by practicing new patterns until they become automatic. Skill is always scalable. The ceiling of your emotional future is not your nature, it is the intensity and honesty of your training. A single reaction can cost what years of intention tried to build. You can lose credibility in one impulsive reply, lose a connection in one emotional outburst, lose an opportunity in one moment of panic, lose self respect in one episode of desperation. Reaction is expensive because it is fast, unfiltered, and powered by an unexamined emotion that hasn't been translated into information. When you act based on the first draft of your nervous system, not the verdict of your intelligence. And first drafts are almost always sloppy, exaggerating, contaminated by ego and fear. The moment you move before thinking, you hand your future to the past version of you who didn't know better. Reflection, on the other hand, multiplies value precisely because it slows impulse long enough to let truth and intelligence participate. Reflection is not overthinking, it is alignment. It is the act of asking, what is really happening? What is my goal here? What would my wiser self do instead of my emotional self? Reflection is profitable because it prevents irreversible damage. It protects your relationships, your reputation, your trajectory, and most importantly, your identity in every domain: business, relationships, negotiation, leadership, even spirituality. The ones who dominate are not the ones who feel less, but the ones who translate before they execute. Think how often regret is born, not from what you knew after thinking, but from what you did before thinking. Anger fires a message that should never have been sent. Insecurity fires an apology that should never have been spoken. Fear fires an exit from a room you were ready for. Reaction is like spending capital impulsively. It gives you immediate relief at a long term price. Reflection is like investing. It delays gratification to protect and multiply value. The pace of reaction is driven by ego, by the inner child who refuses to feel discomfort even for 5 seconds. The ego wants to strike back immediately, to defend, to prove, to escape. Reflection requires humility. It is the posture that says, my first impulse is probably inaccurate. Let me verify. That humility is not weakness, it is power under control. Wild horses impress no one. Trained horses pull empires. We tend to glorify speed, but speed without direction is vandalism. A reaction is fast, but it is blind. Reflection is slower, but it is targeted. 10 extra seconds of silence before responding can spare you 10 months of damage control. 10 extra breaths before making a decision can spare you 10 years of regret. People mock slowness because they confuse impulsiveness with strength. In reality, people who cannot pause are controlled by whatever feeling showed up first. People who can pause are controlled by purpose. Reflection does not mean paralysis or avoidance. It does not mean never acting until you feel perfect clarity. It means you create a clear, minimal gap between stimulus and response, a gap large enough for wisdom to speak. That gap is a financial decision in psychological form. You are choosing to protect your assets, emotional, relational, reputational. Every delayed reaction is insurance. Every thoughtful response is an investment. Reaction keeps you predictable and easily manipulated. People can bait you because they know you will fire back without processing. Reflection makes you unreadable. No one can drag you where they want because nothing external gets to dictate your moves. Calm unnerves the chaotic. Stillness disarms the aggressive. A person who pauses becomes ungovernable from the outside. Most people only reflect after the damage, in regret, in journaling, in post mortems. The powerful reflect before the damage, at the entry point, not the exit point. They investigate the feeling while it is hot, not when it has already burned the bridge. They ask, is this a moment to defend or a moment to observe? Is this impulse serving my future or just gratifying my ego? They understand that not every offense deserves a counterattack. Not every fear deserves obedience. Not every trigger deserves a performance. The cost difference between reaction and reflection multiplies over time. A lifetime of reactions leaves you with fractured relationships, unstable identity, impulsive choices, and accumulated regret. A lifetime of reflection leaves you with trust, respect, leverage, and alignment. One life bleeds value, the other compounds it. If you want to predict the quality of your future, measure the size of the gap between what you feel and what you do. If that gap is zero, your life will be expensive. If that gap is intentional, your life will be profitable. Reaction spends your power instantly. Reflection reinvests your power into a future version of you who will thank you for not moving when your emotions begged you to. Most people treat emotions like enemies to be suppressed or explosions to be unleashed. They either fight them or obey them. Both approaches are expensive. Suppression turns emotions into pressure bombs that later detonate as breakdowns, addictions, or bitterness. Obedience turns emotions into dictators that decide your reactions and ruin logic. The alternative is neither war nor surrender, it is translation. Emotions are coded signals, not curses. They arrive carrying information, not instructions. The task is to interpret before acting. Anger, for example, is often a signal that a boundary was crossed, not a command to destroy the relationship or escalate the conflict. Fear is usually a signal that something matters deeply or that stakes are high, not an instruction to retreat. Sadness is often a signal of meaning. You only grieve what matters, not a verdict that life is empty. Jealousy may point to a desire or insecurity you haven't acknowledged, not an order to resent or sabotage someone. If you translate the signal, you gain clarity. If you fight or obey the emotion blindly, you multiply confusion. To translate an emotion means to interrupt the automatic narrative it tries to write. The mind is fast at turning sensations into stories. I feel ignored, therefore I am unimportant. I feel fear, therefore I am incapable. I feel anger, therefore I must attack. Translation interrupts the shortcut. It asks, what is this emotion trying to alert me to? Not, what is this emotion forcing me to do? That question alone shifts you from victim to interpreter. Fighting emotions wastes its energy because you are trying to silence something that is not trying to harm you. Emotions are not intruders. They are internal sensors built to alert you to needs, violations, risks, and values. Telling yourself, I shouldn't feel this, is like covering the smoke alarm instead of asking where the fire is. The emotion is not the problem, the meaning attached to it is. Once understood, the alarm can stop without being destroyed. Translation also prevents you from mislabeling yourself. Many people call themselves anxious when they are actually unprepared. They call themselves angry when they are actually betrayed. They call themselves depressed when they are actually disconnected from purpose. They call themselves insecure when they are actually comparing themselves to unrealistic standards. The wrong label blocks the right remedy. Translation gives accuracy, and accuracy gives power. Learning to translate emotions requires curiosity instead of judgment. Instead of, why am I like this? Ask, what is this pointing at? Instead of, I need to calm down, ask, what is the need beneath this surge? Beneath an anger is often protection. Beneath anxiety is often uncertainty. Beneath jealousy is often desire. Beneath sadness is often attachment. Beneath numbness is often overload. When you decode the root, you stop negotiating with the symptom. Translation demands stillness, not numbing, but pausing long enough to hear the message behind the noise. People who numb emotions with distractions, scrolling, food, substances, or business are not calming themselves. They are postponing interpretation. And postponed translation returns later as confusion or crisis. What you refuse to understand now will rule you later. When you translate emotions, you turn them from threats into tools. Anger becomes a teacher about where to draw lines. Fear becomes a compass showing what you care about enough to risk for. Envy becomes a mirror reflecting your unlived potential. Loneliness becomes a signal that your environment does not match your needs. Guilt becomes a prompt to recalibrate your behavior to your values. Emotions are intelligence in raw form. Translation refines it. Once you understand what an emotion is saying, you can choose how to act in a way that serves your long term self, not your momentary state. The power shift is enormous. You move from internal chaos to internal negotiation. You stop asking, how do I stop feeling this? And start asking, how do I respond in a way that honors what this is telling me without letting it control me? That is adulthood in its purest form, not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of interpreting it. In the end, those who fight emotions end up damaged by resistance, and those who obey emotions end up damaged by impulse. Those who translate emotions end up informed rather than enslaved. You do not need a different nervous system. You need a different relationship to the one you have. Emotions are letters sent from parts of you that notice what you consciously overlooked. Read them, don't worship them or burn them. Translation is how you turn internal storms into internal guidance. You do not feel the way you feel only because of who you are. You feel the way you feel because of what you are surrounded by. The nervous system is not sealed, it is porous. It absorbs tone, rhythm, speed, volume, energy, and attitude from whatever is close and constant. Environments are emotional thermostats. They set the baseline temperature of your inner state without asking for your permission. A peaceful person placed in chronic chaos begins to vibrate at the speed of that chaos. A disciplined person placed in a careless environment slowly loses edge. A confident person immersed in environments of belittlement begins to shrink. Emotions don't live in isolation, they mirror atmospheres. Think about how quickly you change in different contexts. In a room of angry people, your body tenses even before words start. In a quiet library, your breathing slows without instruction. Around someone who panics easily, your system heightens. Around someone grounded, your mind settles. None of these shifts happen because you consciously decided. They happen because your environment transmitted a state and your nervous system synchronized. You are more programmable by atmosphere than you are by logic. This is why people make the mistake of trying to fix their emotional life internally while keeping their external world unchanged. They meditate in the morning and return to noise all day. They journal insights but stay in circles built on gossip, urgency, and insecurity. They read about peace, then sleep next to stress. They want calm while living in chaos designed structures. You cannot plant a stable tree in violent wind and then blame the tree for shaking. Environment is not just physical places, it includes people, digital inputs, and repeated conversations. A friend who constantly complains calibrates you to heavy emotional frequencies. A feed full of outrage trains your body to live in micro emergencies. Music soaked in violence or despair alters your internal weather. Even subtle emotional habits of those around you, catastrophizing, dramatizing, minimizing, delaying, victimizing, become emotional templates your system imitates. because environments calibrate you. Discipline is less about willpower and more about architecture. The easiest life to control is one that is arranged to make the right emotional state feel natural and the wrong one feel foreign. If your home sounds like conflict, you will walk around armored. If your workspace is cluttered, your thoughts will fragment. If your social circle rewards rage or sarcasm, patience will feel foolish. We become fluent in the emotional language that is spoken most often around us. Your environment can also anesthetize you to dysfunction. When everyone around you is reactive, you stop noticing reaction. When everyone around you normalizes quitting, your standards drop. When everyone around you mocks growth, ambition feels embarrassing. People don't just influence decisions, they rewrite the emotional baseline from which decisions are made. The fastest way to upgrade your emotional life is to upgrade the ecosystem that breeds it. Spend time around people who reflect stability rather than volatility. Curate content that nourishes direction rather than agitation. Design silence into your schedule so your nervous system remembers what calm feels like. Replace rooms where you perform defense with rooms where you can exhale. Environments teach the body what normal is. Change the classroom if you want a different lesson. You cannot always control where you are, but you can control what you allow to be constant. You may be stuck with certain people, but you are not required to give them your daily emotional bandwidth. You may be exposed to stress, but you can build rituals that detox the nervous system before sleep. You may work in chaos, but you can build micro environments, a desk, a routine, a boundary, a headphones barrier that protect regulation. The cost of ignoring environment is cumulative. You may think you are strong enough to stay centered while living in emotional pollution, but corrosion always beats ego. A drop of acid does not destroy metal in one day, but exposed daily, it wins. What you repeatedly sit inside, you eventually internalize. The longer you stay in environments that heat your nervous system, the more you start to believe that heat is your identity. Your emotional life is not solely a product of inner traits, it is the echo of the rooms, voices, and atmospheres you inhabit. If you want a calmer mind, build a calmer ecosystem. If you want stronger composure, stop living inside places that train volatility. If you want emotional clarity, stop drinking from chaotic wells. The thermostat of your environment will always set the first temperature. The question is whether you live in a climate that builds you or bleeds you. Skill without self mastery collapses under pressure. A person can be brilliant, trained, credentialed, experienced, yet lose everything because they cannot regulate what happens inside them when life applies heat. They know what to do, but when ego is poked, fear rises, insecurity whispers, impatience burns, or temptation appears, their intelligence gets hijacked by ungoverned emotion. Self mastery is the insurance policy on every other ability. Without it, your gifts become liabilities the moment stress enters the room. People who only master external skills are strong in perfect conditions. They perform when applause is present, when resources are available, when timelines are generous, when they feel emotionally safe. But the world rarely offers perfect conditions. Deals fall through, criticism arrives, delays happen, betrayal appears, fatigue sets in, markets shift, people misinterpret you, and silence replaces praise. In that reality, technique is not enough. What separates outcomes is not who knows more, but who remains composed while knowing. Self mastery is the trait that allows someone to execute their skill when their nervous system is screaming the opposite. It is the ability to think when adrenaline rises, to wait when urge wants to rush, to speak strategically when anger wants to attack, to continue when despair wants to stop, to resist when impulse wants to indulge. There is nothing mystical about greatness. It is competence protected by inner governance. Look at those who endure at the top. They do not last because they never feel fear, doubt, envy, anger, or exhaustion. They last because those forces do not get the steering wheel. Emotions are passengers, not drivers. Without that hierarchy, talent implodes. You can spot this in every domain. The athlete with better genetics loses to the one with better composure. The entrepreneur with better product loses to the one with better patience. The leader with better vision loses to the one with better restraint. When pressure enters, the contest is no longer skill vs skill. It is self vs self. Self mastery is also the foundation of consistency. Skill produces spikes, self mastery produces streaks. Anyone can be excellent once. It is rare to be excellent repeatedly. Most people quit not because they don't know what to do, but because they cannot manage the feelings that accompany the process: boredom, fatigue, comparison, impatience, humiliation, loneliness. The ones who win are not immune to those feelings. They are governed enough to not obey them. Another distinction: skill makes you valuable, but self mastery makes you trusted. People may admire talent, but they bet their money, reputation, and future on those who can hold their ground under stress. A surgeon who trembles emotionally is scarier than one who lacks a rare technique. A business partner who panics is more dangerous than one who lacks experience. A leader who erupts is more damaging than one who lacks charisma. Emotional volatility erases competence in one moment. Self mastery is also the gatekeeper of opportunity. You can be in the right room with the right people and still sabotage your future because you cannot steward your own impulses. Speaking too soon, reacting too hard, chasing validation, folding under intimidation. Doors close not because you were unskilled, but because you were ungoverned. Rooms of power are not afraid of incompetence, they are afraid of unpredictability. Importantly, self mastery is not emotional suppression. It is the disciplined translation of your inner state into aligned action. You still feel everything. You just don't let raw emotion draft your moves. You notice the surge, decode it, and decide from principle, not from panic. That discipline compounds. A decade of self mastery makes average skill look like genius. A decade of zero self mastery makes genius look like disaster. The world rewards rare traits. Skill is becoming less rare. Information is everywhere. Courses are everywhere. Training is accessible. What remains rare is internal sovereignty, the ability to remain directed while being provoked, disappointed, tested, ignored, or attacked. That rarity is why those who master themselves quietly outperform those who only master tasks. The external world pays for what it can rely on, not what it can admire. In the long arc of a life, you are not defeated by competitors. You are defeated by your reactions. And you are not propelled by brilliance. You are propelled by the ability to stay intact while using your brilliance. Skills build capacity. Self mastery protects it. When everything shakes, the one who governs the inside dictates the outside.